Well, we talked about imagery in the previous part of our discussion. Now we shall go ahead with the next term. The term is in medias res. In medias res means it is a technical term which means narrating a story from the middle after supposing that the audiences are aware of the past events. And generally, the story begins with you know introduction and exposition. We can say there is the beginning, middle, and end. But in medias res is the technique used by many narrators, many authors, to narrate a story from the middle itself, not from the beginning. You must have seen many movies, which begins from the middle of the story, and then the author takes you into the past, then we go ahead into the future. So this is how the technique is used. When we talk about the etymology or the origin of this particular device, this literary term or device, it goes back to the Roman lyric poet Horace. Horace was a very famous Roman poet and even dramatist, and he used this term, this technique in his poem Ars Poetica. And there's a Latin, line, semper ad eventum festinant et in medias res. So in this line, we come across in medias res. And it is a Latin phrase, in medias res, semper ad eventum festinat et in medias res. It is a Latin phrase. In medias res is not a word, it is a phrase, group of words. And it literally means, the literal meaning of the word, of the phrase, is in the midst of things. मध्यात म्हणतो ना आपण, मध्येच, मधून सुरुवात होते. So that is in the midst of things. So in this particular, by using this technique, the author employs this particular expression as a common strategy to start their stories, to initiate their stories. Generally, we have the habit, of listening to the stories from the beginning. Means there was a king, and then something of the kind, or childhood, then young age, and then old age. But they begin from the young age itself. Okay, they don't talk about the background. So it starts in the middle of the action. So it refers, when we talk about this particular meaning, it refers to literary technique of beginning the narrative when the action has already begun. If you have seen that Hindi version of the Telugu movie, in that Telugu movies dubbed into Hindi, okay, and in we come across, the middle of the story in the very beginning itself, and then gradually we are taken to the past. Okay. Unfortunately, I don't remember the title. It's a Telugu title. Okay. So the term in medias res is used particularly in connection with the epic. Epic means, you might be knowing Ramayana is the epic, Paradise Lost is the epic, Beowulf is the epic, Paradise Regained is the epic. Now, epic is a very big narrative poem. Ramayana and Mahabharata are epics, very famous epics. So this term is particularly used in connection with the epic, which traditionally begins in medias res. The epic beginning with medias res means in the middle of the story. And this technique in medias res demands beginning a narrative in the very middle of its action, from some vital point, some important point of the action, okay, begins, and then we are taken to the past when most of the action has occurred. And the author then freely moves backward and forward at his leisure, as per his convenience. Then he, by doing so, he connects the dots of the story. Okay, means all the explanations regarding the significance of setting, plot, characters, and the miniature of the story are gradually revealed in the form of a character dialogues or thoughts or flashbacks. Flashbacks means taking into past, or sometimes that they talk with each other. Through their dialogues, we understand. They think, the characters think. Through their thinking, we understand the past. Okay, the setting and environment also contribute to add to the details of the action in this kind of technique. Okay, which are introduced at the beginning of the story. The famous examples of in medias res are Homer's poem "The Iliad." This is very famous example. So within the first line, the reader is dropped directly into the ongoing events of the Trojan War. No, the War of Troy, we call it Trojan War. We, in the very first line itself, we are dropped into the events of Trojan War, and we see the action unfold between the warring Greeks and Trojans. Gradually, we come to know about the reason behind the war between these Greeks and Trojans. Means there is kidnapping, bribery, plagues, and death. All are shown in the initial first scenes, and then uh, we are taken into the past. Maybe I think Bahubali had the same technique. The movie Bahubali in medias res means it starts from the middle, then we are taken to the past. Bahubali one, I think. Okay. There is another important term, that is initiation story. So initiation story is a story in which protagonists, the major main characters, these protagonists are mainly children or young persons in many of the stories. The children or young persons go through an experience. Sometimes this is very common. Sometimes this experience may be painful or disconcerting, and this experience carries them from innocence to some new form of knowledge and maturity. It happens, in many of the Hindi movies you come across this. In Mukaddar Ka Sikandar, for example, of Amitabh Bachchan. I don't know whether you have seen these movies. You come across this kind of initiation story. Means there is a child who undergo the painful experience. His parents are killed, and then he undergoes a very painful experience of life, and then his journey from innocence to some new form of knowledge. He gets some knowledge of the world, and he gets maturity. Even that Mary Jung of Anil Kapoor is the example of this initiation story, wherein you see the child Anil Kapoor, undergoes a very painful experience of his life. His parents, his father is murdered, then his mother loses her senses, she becomes dumb, she can't talk at all, and even she can't live, as a normal person. And he has to undergo a very painful experience, and he learns a lesson for life. He becomes very mature character. So initiation story is a narrative in which a character, as I said, a child or young man, first learns a significant, life changing truth about the universe, society, people, or himself or herself. In many of the Hindi movies, typical Amitabh Bachchan stories, you come across this kind of, life changing. They learn that life is like this. No, money is very important, and then they run after money. Okay, so it is also called an initiation or rites of passage story. Another term used to refer to initiation story is rites of passage story. And the famous examples of initiation stories are William Faulkner's The Bear, Nathaniel Hawthorne's Young Goodman Browns, Alice Walker's The Hell with Dying, and Robert Payne Warren's Blackberry Winter. These are some of the important, significant examples of initiation story.